Good day, mortals. My name is Mika, and today I'm going to be talking about the differences between the different jobs that you can get at a Renaissance festival. Now, I will be talking about 3 specific types of jobs. One is being a vendor, sales associate, a cast member, and being an independent performer or entertainer. Because those are the things that I have experience with. I have no experience with like selling food or being a festival staff member or anything like that. So I can't personally talk about that experience, but I can talk about my experiences. So if you are looking for a job at the Renaissance Festival, I can tell you the differences between being a vendor, cast, and independent performer. Now, just to kind of summarize my personal experience, back in 2018, I worked at the Texas Renaissance Festival in the Ravenswood leather booth as a sales associate. I only worked there for 1 year because after that I moved to Ohio, had a baby and stuff, and then I auditioned for the Ohio Renaissance Festival's cast. There I played Sprout the Fate of Seeds. That is the only character I've ever played. And then in the summer of 2022, I started branching off, becoming a more independent performer as Sprout. So far I have experience working at the Kentucky Highland Renaissance Festival as an independent kind of laner or just a wandering Fae performer, although by the end of it I ended up just sitting most of the day because I discovered that's how I collect the most tips, is by sitting in one spot. But basically as a roamer or a laner, that's what I was hired for. So I'm going to be going through all of the different pros and cons of each job and kind of discussing what are my personal favorites, the things that I personally like about each job, or things that I don't really like about each job. And so yeah, let's get right into it. So I'm going to start with being a vendor sales associate. Now, working at Ravenswood Leather might have been a unique experience for the typical vendor sales associate job. To put this into perspective, this was at the biggest, most populated Renaissance Festival in America, and it was in the biggest, most popular shop at the festival. So we were easily getting tens of thousands, even like 50,000 people inside the shop a day. It was a very busy job and a bit stressful. I'm sure that at most festivals and most booths, it is not that stressful. The people that I worked with were fantastic. I love them. I still call them my friends today, and I still try to visit them once a year. So the stress and the issues that I personally have with working there do not come from the people. It just comes from the physical job itself. I am not a fan of being a sales associate in general. It's just not my thing. I'm an artist, I'm a performer, I like to craft. I don't like retail. It's not my thing. But being a sales associate has been the best paying job at the festival that I've experienced. Not including tips. I've gotten pretty good tips as an independent performer. But just when it comes to the festival itself actually paying me, or in that case, the booth owner, I definitely have gotten the most money from there. Working there, I was getting paid $10 an hour. And that was back in 2018. I'm sure it's gone up by now. And also mind you that the minimum wage in Texas is $7.25, or at least it was back in 2018. So $10 an hour is pretty good, especially for just like, you know, a retail sales associate type of job. And it was very good for Renaissance Festival standards. Back then, at the Texas Renaissance Festival in 2018, I heard that most vendors were paying like about $8 an hour. I heard some were paying less than minimum wage, but they were collecting tips. Now at the Ohio Renaissance Festival, I've heard a completely different story. In 2022, I hear they're paying like $19 an hour and stuff like that. So I guess it just depends on your state, your Renaissance Festival. But generally speaking, it's gonna be either minimum wage or just a little bit above minimum wage. Working at a booth may also give you opportunities to work during the week as well. Me personally, I worked for I think it was 2 weeks before the festival started to get all the merchandise, because they were transporting it from Oregon to Texas and getting it all cleaned up, getting all the merch in the right place, and it's a big shop, so there was a lot to do. Then I worked Saturdays and Sundays during the run, but I also worked, did I work Mondays? I at least worked Fridays to clean the shop and to get more in stock and everything. And then I worked for I think 1 week after the festival had ended to clear out the shop. Some vendor booths, if you are a crafter, may also allow you to help in making the merchandise. This totally depends on the vendor, but they usually work on their merchandise during the run as well, and they may need help doing that, so they may offer a job and you actually physically helping them make the product that they sell. That was not my case with Ravenswood Leather. But working at Ravenswood Leather has been the worst when it comes to breaks. On busy days, we had 0 breaks. We had to run to the restroom as fast as we could, and we had to eat while we were working out on the floor. There were moments when I was literally stuffing my face with food while talking to customers, and they often thought it was hilarious because they generally understand, like, wow, you are so busy, the shop is packed full, it is actually probably a fire hazard. There were times at the festival where they were pulling people out of the store because it started to become a fire hazard. Like it was like illegal to have that many people in the store, so they were pulling people out. That's how busy and crazy that store got sometimes. And my boss wanted us to talk to people the entire time without stopping, because his idea was, you know, if you talk to these people and you make them feel good, then they're more likely to buy the product. So that was constant socialization the entire day with no breaks. It was stressful. It was not my preferred job. I prefer performing way more than that. But it was still fun. It was not all a bad experience. I would have worked there again if performing wasn't an option for me. It was still fun. I still enjoyed it. Also, something to keep in mind, working at the festival, generally speaking, you are not an employee. You are a private contractor. That means that it is not required by law for the festival or for your booth employer. I say employer, but you're not an employee. They're legally allowed to pay you less than minimum wage, which sucks. It does. I'm not a fan of that, but that's the reality. And that is a very important thing to note about moving on to the performer's life. You are absolutely not an employee. You are a private contractor. Moving on to being a cast member, I am currently a cast member for the Ohio Renaissance Festival. I have been a cast member since 2020. That's when I first auditioned and made it. I played Sprout, the Fae of Seeds, since 2020, and boy, this job is way more fun than being a sales associate. It is just performing in general and being Sprout. Basically, my job as Sprout as a cast member and my job as an independent, my performing is basically the same, so they're like equally as fun, but it is so fun. I love it. It's my favorite thing to do. However, being a cast member pays the absolute least. For the Ohio Renaissance Festival, the standard cast member pay is $10 a day, and that is for 8-hour shifts. I forgot to mention, at the Texas Renaissance Festival, it is 12-hour shifts. At the Ohio Renaissance Festival, it is 8. So it's either 8 or like 8.5. That being said, we do have a lot of requirements being on cast, but our requirements are mostly with things like garb, or within the face case, makeup, and you have to attend one of the shows. You have to be in one of the shows. But when it comes to your actual performance quality and like how often you're out on the streets interacting with people, in my experience, with the way I perceive things, staff, guild leaders, whatever, don't really keep up with how often you're interacting with the streets. If you're having a bad day, if you're feeling not great for whatever reason, you can take that time off. You can chill and just sit there and do whatever you need to do to recover. They do not care if you're at the festival and you make it to your shows, but you have to like kind of sit out the rest of the day. Nobody really keeps an eye on that. Now, if you were doing that every single day, I'm sure someone would notice and they would have a problem with it. But if you're having a bad day and you just want to sit in the green room all day, no one really monitors that. And they're totally understanding and they're totally forgiving if you're having a rough day. Even if you have to miss your shows, especially one of the the main cast shows. There are some guild specific shows, but for the standard main cast shows, if you have to miss, it's generally not a big deal because there are enough people and it's generally like the show's like a group thing. So if you have to miss, no biggie. When you're not doing your shows, you basically have complete free roam of the festival. You can shop if you want, you can watch shows. They highly encourage you to interact all day. But in my experience, they don't sit there and like monitor every single person to make sure that they're, you know, getting enough hours of interaction in. For me personally, I want to do interactions all day, every day, with only having breaks that I absolutely need to like eat and to use the restroom and to put more ice on my shirt. But this is what I love to do, and this is why I want to be an independent, because I love it. I want to do this for a living as much as I can possibly make it a living. Working as a cast member, this probably goes for just about every festival. You get at least one meal ticket a day. Some festivals might give more meal tickets. At the Ohio Renaissance Festival, we get an entire packet, and that is enough to cover one meal ticket a day. At the Kentucky Highland Renaissance Festival, we were only allowed to pick one meal ticket a day. So every single day, I had to go to the place and pick up a meal ticket for that day. So if I missed a day, I couldn't like stock up on meal tickets, which kind of sucks. At the Ohio Renaissance Festival, we often, like especially the first half of the season, we often didn't get food because it's too hot to eat hot food, and there's not a whole lot of cold options. So a lot of the times we would just eat our own food, and then by the end, like the second half of the season when it's freezing cold, we just unload on food. You know, at the end of the season, I might buy like 3 meals a day because I have plenty of meal tickets. Generally, a cast gets to, if traveling to your local Renaissance Festival is a bit of an issue, let's say you live kind of far away, maybe an hour, maybe 2 hours away, usually festivals will allow camping for cast members or for their performers in general. At Ohio Renaissance Festival, my experience has been complete free shipping, and just, you know, I have to follow certain rules, but I can just come camp, and they do have specific spots designated for each camper, but like it's totally free. At the Kentucky Highland Renaissance Festival, it's not free. And I will get into that more when I get into the independent performer aspect, just because that has been my experience with Kentucky. But free camping, and they might do free camping for cast, I'm not sure. But at Ohio, free camping for cast, you get 2 months of rehearsals before the festival. Some festivals do less rehearsal time, some festivals do more rehearsal time. Ohio is about 2 months, weekends only, which are required if you're not a volunteer, which, I mean, you're basically a volunteer regardless, but if you're gonna get paid at all by the festival, you have to show up to at least most of the rehearsals. There is an option to be a complete volunteer, and I don't think you have to show up to any rehearsals. You have to be a veteran, which means like you have to have done it for more than 1 year. But in order to be a volunteer, I think you have to attend at least half of the actual festival run. I don't think you can just come in for like 1 weekend as a volunteer. Another important thing to mention about money is that cast is generally not allowed to collect tips. That doesn't mean that if someone physically hands me a tip that I'm gonna deny it, because I'm absolutely not. But I'm not allowed to have like a tips jar. There are exceptions to this rule with certain shows and things, but generally cast does not allow a tips jar. Now, I think when it comes to the rules or lack thereof at the festival, how we have mostly free range of the festival, I can understand that. Me personally, I don't want to have free reign of the festival all the time. I want to work. So I want to be allowed to have tips. Some other festivals do things differently. Generally, it's like standard cast can't collect tips, but certain cast shows, they can collect tips in a tip jar during their show. So it really just depends on the shows that you're doing, depends on your festival. And I think this is going to be my last important cast note. When you are a cast member, at the end of the day, the festival staff, the creative director of cast, chooses your role. Now, generally, they want you to play the role that you want, but you can't play whatever you want, whatever character you want, unless it benefits the festival. So if you make cast, and let's say you want to play a character that's just not fit for the festival, they will cast you as something else, and you just have to accept that role or leave cast, basically. I'm sure there could be times where you're like, oh, you casted me as a fishmongerer, but I'd rather be a carpenter or something. They could probably work things out. But if you want to be a fae, but you don't make it into the fae, or you want to be some type of fae that the festival doesn't want you to play, you can't play that character. You have to play whatever character that the festival is willing to have. Now let's move on to what it's like to be an independent performer or entertainer. So being an independent is a bit different from being a cast member. Being a cast member, you audition at the designated audition date, and you can suggest what you want your character to be, but ultimately it is the festival decision what your character is. Whereas an independent, you do everything. You create your character and you apply that character, that performance to the festival. You email them, whatever, it's generally just an email. You message them saying, hey, I'm interested in performing at this festival, yada yada yada. Sometimes they'll reach out to you. I've had people reach out to me before, but if they don't reach out to you, you can just reach out to them. You say, hey, this is what I have to offer. Will you hire me? And you can also give like your own personal pay rates. The festival may accept your pay rates. They may try to negotiate your pay rate. It really just depends on the festival. And then you take that act that you had applied with and you just perform it at the festival. And you have to work out like scheduling and stuff like that, but generally your act is your act. You don't need to change it. The only thing you need to do is like make sure that you're at the right location at the right time. You're not, intruding on any other performer's space or whatever. But they will not tell you, hey, you gotta change your act. You gotta change your character. It's more of like a, here's what I have to offer, take it or leave it kind of thing. Now it can get tricky if you have a certain act and there's another performer already at the festival who does the same kind of act. Let's say it's a fire breathing show or something. There could be conflicts there because then you have two acts that are way too similar. It might be fine at like a really, really big festival, but at a small festival, there's probably gonna be some issues there. There could be negotiations with your act in that case, but other than that, there's really no, they don't really tell you what you need to be doing. Now, my personal experience so far has been a laner or a roamer or just someone who sits there and like entertains people, interacts with them. I played on my tongue drum, but I didn't have a show act on a stage. That could change in the future, but for now, I had no experience with that. The way I performed was I sat in a spot and I had a little scenery behind me. I had my sprout banner. I had my tips jar. I had another little bowl full of stickers for the kids who didn't want magic beans, or adults, and a little plate of business cards. And I had like a leaf blanket to sit on and a little log cushion, and I just sat there all day. I moved locations during the day, so I would sit in one spot and then I would get up, take a restroom break, eat break maybe, put ice in my shirt, then I'd go to another location and I'd sit there. It just kind of depended on what part of the festival was busiest that day. So like, for example, we have a Fay Grove at the Kentucky Highland Renaissance Festival. There were times of the day where the Fay Grove was packed, and there were times of the day where it was empty. So when it was empty, I wanted to get the heck out of there. So that's the main reason why I had different spots. And all of my belongings were temporary. Nothing was like permanently stationed anywhere. I had a big old leaf basket that I could put all my stuff in and just move to the next location. And while I am sitting there, I will play on my tongue drum, and if someone comes to me, I will interact with them, or even if they just pass me by, I will interact with them. I interact with every single person who walks in front of me. Even if they don't really want to interact with me, I will at least say good day. And I usually give them a compliment of some sort, whether it's, I like your garb or whatever. Oftentimes, if a child crosses my path and doesn't really want to interact with me, I will encourage them to interact with me by saying, would you like a magic bean? Or does anyone want a magic bean? And they hear magic bean, and the parents usually get into it like, oh, magic bean, do you want a magic bean? And then usually the kids want to come up and see me. Sometimes they want to come up and see me regardless, but sometimes they're a little shy and they're a little intimidated by the way I look, because I look not human. But then when I start talking to them and I present that like high-pitched friendly voice and I offer them the magic bean, then they get really excited. My quick interactions usually just involve me giving them a magic bean. I kind of explain what the magic bean is. I introduce myself, I ask them for their name, and I tell them I'm the Fae of Seas, and then I give them the magic bean, and I tell them that it's lucky, and how to you know, keep it on you, it'll bring you good luck, all that kind of stuff. And then they say thank you, and I say you're welcome, and then I say have a great day, and that's about it. But for the other interactions, for the people who want to stay a little bit longer, all of that becomes improv at that point. So sometimes they want to ask me about me, Sprout. Sometimes they want to ask about the Fae realm. Sometimes they just want to talk about their festival day. I will often ask them if they're having a good day, what's their favorite part of the festival. Sometimes they just want to play on my tongue drum, which I definitely offer that to them. And sometimes they just want to sit next to me and they just want to chill next to me and listen to me play, and that's totally cool too. And all this kind of stuff is the same thing that I do at Ohio Fest as a cast member. It's just without the tips jar and the banner and all that kind of stuff. But my main moneymaker working as an independent is the tips, which common sense, right? I make good money on tips. The money on tips plus the money I make at the festival is good money. Now, it's not as good as it would be, from what I hear, it's not as good if I was working at like a birthday party or a more private event. People often say that those kind of events, those people planning those events are willing to pay more usually than the festival. But also you don't really get tips at like a birthday party, so it probably kind of evens out. Obviously, the bigger your festival is, like in population, and the better your act is, the more tips you're gonna make. But you need a tip jar, because if you don't have a tip jar, people don't know that they're supposed to tip you. And sometimes at the Ohio Fest, which it kind of blows my mind when they ask me this, but sometimes people ask me if I work there or if I'm like a really dedicated patron, because some patrons are that dedicated. But if you have a tips jar out and it says tips on it, people know, oh, she works here and she depends on tips to make her money. Therefore, let me tip. Also, just a little side tip here, pun intended. Have an option for people to tip using a QR code, because a lot of people these days, especially after 2020, a lot of people don't really do cash anymore, or they don't, they might spend all their money at, on food and on vendor stuff, but then not have extra money to pay for tips. So have a QR code option. I use PayPal. I put it on my business cards. And they say I don't have the money or whatever, I'll give them a business card and it says, tip here, and it has a little QR code so that they can tip digitally from their card, from their bank account. But one thing that I think is interesting with being a sort of laner roamer character is that I collect tips the entire day as long as I'm out. If I have to take a break, obviously I don't collect tips while I'm on break, but it's like an all-day thing. And I get to choose how much I'm out, because I am getting paid by the day and not the hour. But, I chose to be out the entire day with only like 2 15-minute breaks. Whereas a stage act only collects tips during their stage act. Now for me, I think the best option would probably be a stage act that also does lane work, if that is an option for me in the future. I know stage acts generally get paid more by the festival itself, but they only have like 2 or 3 times a day where they collect tips. But if I had the option to do a stage act and collect the tips during the stage act, but then also go out in the lane and like play on my tongue drum or just do, the normal interactions and collect tips there, that would be pretty cool. I'd make a lot of money that way. But for the stage acts, generally, when they're not doing their performance, they can go and not act like a patron, but they can go and like watch other shows, they can, shop and stuff like that. I technically am allowed to do that too, but I just don't, because I like making money. and there's usually at least one rain day where the festival is basically dead because it's raining. I'll just take my umbrella out and I'll just go shopping because there's nobody out. So I use my rain days as an opportunity to go see any shows that are actually performing, like if they're under a roof, and then go shopping. So I think that is all I have for this video. In the future, when I start getting more gigs at Sprout, I'll probably end up making another video similar to this, but it might be like working as an independent for Renaissance festivals versus working at birthday parties versus working at some other type of event. It might be a video something like that. It just depends on if I can get those type of gigs. I know I can get birthday party gigs because I've already had multiple people come to me about birthday parties. It's just a matter of like getting insurance and, getting contracts and stuff like that. I don't know how to do any of that because I don't want like a child to get injured at the party and then the parents blame me because they think I'm some sort of babysitter. But maybe in the future, once I get that kind of stuff figured out, I'll do birthday parties, and then I can make another video like this talking about the different experiences of being an independent fairy. So yeah, I hope that you all enjoy this video. I hope that somebody learned something new from this video, especially if you are looking to work at a Renaissance festival. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I really hope to see you in the next video.